I had just given birth, but my back wouldn't stop hurting. My husband said I was just being dramatic. Then he checked the camera, and his world collapsed. I bit through my lip trying not to scream. Not metaphorically. I mean, I pressed my teeth into the inside of my lower lip so hard that I tasted copper, standing at the kitchen counter at 5:47 in the morning, both hands gripping the edge of the sink, waiting for my legs to remember they were legs. Sophia was crying. She had been crying for 11 minutes. I know because the clock on the microwave was directly in my eye line, and I had been counting, not because I didn't want to go to her. I wanted nothing more than to go to her, but because my body had decided, again, that it was not going to cooperate, and I was negotiating with it the way you negotiate with something that has all the power and none of the patience. Move, I told my legs. They shook. They held. I let go of the counter and crossed the kitchen in 8 careful steps, each one landing like I was testing ice, each one requiring more concentration than it should have required from a 31-year-old woman who had, 14 days ago, been told by her discharge nurse to take it easy, but you should be getting back to normal soon. Normal. I picked up my daughter. I held her against my chest. I swayed the way you sway with a newborn, the instinctive side-to-side that costs nothing when you're healthy, and costs everything when your lower back is a column of fire from your tailbone to your shoulder blades. I didn't make a sound. I had learned in 14 days not to make a sound. My name is Isabel Reyes Santos. I'm 31 years old. I had a baby 2 weeks ago. And somewhere in our bedroom, my husband Marco was sleeping through this. The way he slept through most things, the way he had always slept through most things, except that now sleeping through things had a different weight to it. Now it meant something it hadn't before. I stood in the kitchen at 5:47 a.m. with my daughter against my chest and my legs shaking and blood on the inside of my lip, and I thought, I cannot keep doing this alone. What I didn't know was that I wouldn't have to. The camera in the living room was going to say everything I couldn't. Let me back up. I had been with Marco Santos for 6 years before Sophia was born. We met through friends of friends at a birthday dinner. He was funny and attentive and had the particular quality I have always been drawn to in a man, which is the quality of paying attention. He remembered things. He noticed things. On our 3rd date, he asked about my mother, who had been sick, and I had mentioned it only once, and he had not forgotten. And I thought, this is the kind of person you build a life with. For years, I was right. He was a structural engineer, disciplined, methodical, the kind of man who thought in load-bearing terms, who looked at problems and identified the point of failure and worked from there. It was professionally useful and personally sometimes a little difficult, because the same quality that made him good at his work also made him occasionally resistant to things that couldn't be measured. Feelings, pain, the categories of experience that don't produce data. I was a high school biology teacher. I was, by nature and training, someone who believed in evidence. We thought this made us compatible. 2 people who respected the observable world. What I didn't understand until it was too late was that for Marco, observable meant something narrow. It meant what he could see with his own eyes, in real time, on his terms. It meant the things that registered in his field of vision and matched his existing model of how things worked. Anything outside that field, anything that required him to take someone's word for it, to extend belief into territory he couldn't personally verify. He filed under exaggeration, drama, attention-seeking. I don't think he knew he did it. That's the part I've had to sit with. The pregnancy was beautiful and hard, and his engagement with it was complicated in the way that engagement with something you can't fully share is always complicated. He came to appointments. He read the books I gave him, or most of them. He was tender in the way of a man who loves you and is also a little terrified of the enormous thing that is happening and has no blueprint for his own fear. When my back started hurting at 28 weeks, the specific grinding low back pain of a pregnancy pressing down on a spinal structure that had not been consulted about this arrangement, he was sympathetic, briefly. Then it became part of the background, one of the many things that were happening that were normal and expected and didn't require sustained engagement. All pregnant women get back pain, he said once, when I asked him to carry the groceries. He wasn't wrong. He also wasn't paying close enough attention. Sophia arrived on a Thursday at 3:22 a.m. after 19 hours of labor that ended in an emergency situation. I will not detail here except to say that it was not straightforward and it was not what we planned, and the doctor who handled it, Dr. Veronica Ang, maternal fetal medicine specialist, 8 years at our hospital, told me afterward that my recovery would need to be careful and monitored and that I should not hesitate to come back if anything felt wrong. I should have listened to her more carefully. I should have listened to myself. Day 3. I told Marco my back was worse, not better. Worse. The kind of worse that felt different from the pregnancy pain, sharper, more located, centered at a specific point in my lower spine that I could press on with 2 fingers and have it make me gasp. He was making coffee. All women go through that, he said. He didn't turn around. Stop the drama. I stood at the doorway of our kitchen holding our 3-day-old daughter and looked at the back of his head. I bit my lip. I didn't say anything else. Day 5. Sophia had a 3 a.m. feeding. I got up because Marco worked and I was on leave, and we had arranged it this way. An arrangement that had seemed logical in the hypothetical and now felt like I was drowning slowly while someone made reasonable points about the importance of staying afloat. I got to the bassinet. I picked her up. On the way back to the nursing chair, my right leg buckled. Not fell. Not gave out completely. Just buckled, like a joint briefly forgetting its job. And I caught myself on the wall with my free hand. Sophia pressed to my chest with the other. And I stood there in the dark for a moment, waiting for my heart to stop pounding. I put Sophia down. everything. I fed her. I changed her. I put her back. I went to the bathroom and sat on the cold tile floor and pressed my hands over my mouth and breathed until my eyes stopped burning. Then I went back to bed. In the morning, I told Marco my leg had buckled in the night. He looked up from his phone. Probably just tired, he said. He went back to his phone. Day 7. The numbness started. It arrived without announcement. A Tuesday morning, both feet. The sensation of walking on a surface I could not quite feel. Like the first stage of a limb falling asleep, except it didn't go away when I moved around. I stood at the kitchen counter for 8 minutes waiting for it to resolve, and it mostly did. Or enough that I could function. Enough that I could carry Sophia through her morning. Enough that I could tell myself it was nothing. I didn't tell Marco. I had done the math quietly over 7 days. Every time I said something was wrong, he had a response ready. One that was either dismissive or slightly annoyed, as though my body's rebellion was a personal imposition. I had learned in 7 days that telling him cost me something and produced nothing, and I had begun conserving the energy I would have spent telling him and directing it toward the task of getting through each day. This is something I now understand, with the help of a very good therapist, as a response to not being believed. You stop reporting, not because the thing stops being true, because you have learned that the reporting is worse than the silence. Day 9. You're so OA. You're scaring the baby. That was what he said when he walked past me crying in the living room. OA. Overacting. A Philippine expression for overdoing it, performing emotion for effect. He said it the way you say something you've said before, with the ease of a man who has already categorized a situation and doesn't need to look at it again. I went to the bathroom. I ran the tap so he couldn't hear me. Day 11. I called my mother, Elena Reyes, retired nurse, 41 years of clinical experience, the woman who had held my hand through 19 hours of labor because Marco had stepped out for air at the relevant moment, listened to everything I told her. She asked specific questions in the way of a former healthcare professional: location, character of the pain, radiation pattern, associated symptoms. When I described the numbness, she went quiet. Isabel, she said, I need you to go to the doctor. Marco thinks I'm overreacting. Another quiet. Isabel. Her voice was controlled in a way that told me it was costing her something. I need you to go to the doctor regardless of what Marco thinks. The numbness in your feet is not normal postpartum recovery. Do you understand me? I'll try, I said. Not try, she said. Go. I hung up and looked at the ceiling and thought about going to the doctor and coming home and Marco's sigh when I told him what they'd found and the thing he would say. The particular inflection of I told you there was nothing wrong that would somehow transform the visit into confirmation that I was, in fact, dramatic. I waited 2 more days. Day 13. I slid off the couch and onto the floor. Not slowly, not by accident, not in a way that could be misread. My legs simply stopped holding me and I went down, and the pain hit at the base of my spine with a specificity that took the breath completely out of me. I sat on the floor with my hand pressed flat against my lower back, and Sophia in her bassinet 2 feet away making the small sounds that meant she was about to need me, and I sat there and I assessed my options and found them limited. Marco was on the couch. He was right there. Baby, I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. It hurts so much. Please. He didn't turn his head all the way. He looked at me from the corner of his eye. That particular angle, the one that doesn't require interrupting whatever you were doing, the one that communicates that the thing you're doing is more important than what's being asked of you. You just want attention, he said. You're doing it again. I nodded. I sat on the cold floor with my hand on my back and tears running quietly down my face, and I did not say anything else, because I had nothing left that seemed worth the cost of saying it. Sophia made the sounds that meant she needed me. I started crawling. I want to be honest about what crawling to your newborn, because your legs won't hold you, feels like. It feels like the end of something, not dramatically, not with any kind of finality that announces itself. It feels like the quiet closing of a door inside you, the part of you that was still trying, still reaching for the version of this where the person beside you sees you and responds. That part simply and finally going still. I reached Sophia. I lifted her. I hummed through clenched teeth so she couldn't hear the sound that wanted to come out, the sound that had been building for 13 days of not being believed. She settled. I sat on the floor with my back against the bassinet, my daughter in my arms, the electric fan humming in the corner, and I breathed in and out and told myself tomorrow I would call Dr. Ang and make an appointment regardless of what Marco thought and regardless of what he said when I came home, and I would hand her the description of everything that had been happening, and I would let her decide what it was. Tomorrow. Tonight I sat on the floor with my baby and I kept my eyes closed and I breathed. I didn't know Marco couldn't sleep. I didn't know he'd opened his laptop. I didn't know he'd found the camera. I had installed the CCTV camera in the living room 4 months before Sophia was born. A Reolink indoor camera, 1080p, motion activated, storing 30 days of footage to a local hard drive. I installed it because I'd read about the importance of home security with a new baby. I had not thought about it since. I had forgotten it was there. Marco had forgotten it too, until that night when he couldn't sleep and opened his laptop and started clicking through the footage looking for, I don't know what, something to watch, a distraction. He found a Tuesday, 3 days earlier, the day after he had told me I was doing it again. The footage was time-stamped 2:38 a.m. He watched me try to get up from the couch. He watched me grip the cushion, both hands, white-knuckled, in the specific grip of someone exerting full effort at a task that should require none. He watched the effort it cost. He watched me fail. He watched me try again. He watched me shake. He watched me sink think back. He watched what happened next. The moment my legs gave completely and I went to the floor, and he watched me pause there for a moment, and then he watched me start to crawl. He watched me crawl to our daughter's blanket because my legs had stopped working, and she was crying, and I was her mother, and there was no one else. He watched me kiss her forehead. He watched me hum, and this is the part, he would tell me later, that broke something open in him that he hadn't known was sealed, because you could see in the footage, if you looked at my face, the specific concentration of someone managing pain in real time, the jaw set, the eyes squeezed, the way a person looks when they are making sounds designed to soothe a baby, while the sounds they're actually feeling are very different. He had been right there. He had been 10 feet away. He had told me I just wanted attention. I didn't hear him come in. I had my eyes closed. Sophia warm and settled against my chest, the fan humming, the particular 3 a.m. quiet of a house that has gone as still as it's going to go. I was breathing through a slow wave of pain, lower back, radiating, the kind that builds and crests and subsides if you stay very still and give it time. I felt a hand on my back, warm, careful, trembling slightly in a way that hands tremble when they belong to a person who is not entirely in control of themselves. I opened my eyes. Marco was on the floor beside me. His face, I had seen Marco cry twice in 6 years. Once at his father's funeral, controlled and brief. Once at the end of a film he claims he was not crying at. I had never seen his face do what it was doing right now, which was the face of a man who has seen something that has rearranged him, who is on the other side of an understanding he cannot unhave, and is not yet sure what to do with himself there. Red eyes, wet cheeks, the particular undone quality of someone who has been confronted with evidence that they were wrong in a way that cost someone they loved something real. Baby, his voice broke on the first syllable. He cleared his throat. He tried again. Does it really hurt that much? I looked at him. I was so tired. Is everything you said, what was all of it true? I thought about the blood I'd bitten into my own lip. I thought about the bathroom floor at 3 a.m. with the tap running. I thought about you're so OA and stop the drama and just want attention, and 13 days of carrying a body that was failing while the person who was supposed to be my partner filed it under force. I'm not pretending, I said. You just didn't want to believe me. He pulled me in. Not carefully, not with the managed tenderness of a person performing an apology. He pulled me in the way you pull someone in when you have understood something terrible about yourself, and the only thing available is proximity, is presence, is the physical fact of being beside the person you failed. Sophia was between us. The fan hummed. The house was quiet in a way it had not been quiet in 13 days. Not the silence of someone enduring alone, but the silence of two people finally in the same place. I cried into his shoulder, not from sadness, or not only from sadness, from the specific bone-deep exhaustion of a person who has been telling the truth for 2 weeks and has just finally been believed. I was so tired of having to be believed. Marco drove me to the hospital himself the next morning. He called Dr. Ang's clinic at 7 a.m. and explained the symptoms: the lower back, the radiating pain, the numbness in the feet, the difficulty standing, and the nurse who took the call told him to come in immediately and to say that it was urgent, which he did, and it was. Dr. Veronica Ang, maternal fetal medicine, 8 years at our hospital and the kind of doctor who conveys urgency without alarming you, reviewed my symptoms and ordered an MRI within the same hour. The MRI was performed by a radiologist named Dr. James Obumseli, board-certified 15 years in diagnostic imaging, who delivered his preliminary findings to Dr. Ang while we were still in the building. Disc herniation, L4, L5, with nerve compression. Dr. Ang sat across from us in her office and explained it in the clear, measured way of someone who wants you to understand exactly what has been happening and also wants you to understand that it is manageable now that it is being addressed. The herniation had likely occurred during labor. It had been aggravated significantly by 14 days of physical activity, lifting, carrying, bending, the full body effort of caring for a newborn, without diagnosis or appropriate management. The nerve compression was the source of the numbness. The radiating pain was the source of the radiating pain. This is real, Dr. Ang said. She said it simply, in the tone of a doctor stating a fact, without looking at Marco. This is a documented injury that requires treatment. She looked at me. I'm sorry you waited this long to come in. I said, so am I. Marco didn't say anything. He sat beside me in Dr. Ang's office with his hands on his knees and his jaw tight in the specific way of a man holding something in that he will say later, privately, when there isn't a doctor in the room to witness it. He referred us to Dr. Rita Castillo, a physiatrist, physical medicine and rehabilitation, 12 years of practice specializing in postpartum spinal complications. A name Dr. Ang wrote on a referral card and handed directly to me. I want you to see her this week, she said. I'll make the appointment today, Marco said. It was the first thing he'd said in 40 minutes. Dr. Rita Castillo had an office with plants in it. I noticed this when we came in because I notice plants the way you notice the small hospitable things that tell you about a person. She had a direct way of asking questions and a complete way of listening to the answers, and she went through my 14 days of symptom history with the methodical attention of someone building an accurate picture. She asked me when the pain started. She asked when I first noticed the numbness. She asked, and this was the question I had not anticipated, whether I had felt that my symptoms were taken seriously. I looked at Marco. Marco looked at the floor. I waited longer than I should have to come in, I said carefully. Dr. Castillo looked at me for a moment, then at Marco, then back to her notes. We're going to start a structured rehabilitation program, she said. 8 weeks weeks minimum. The nerve compression should resolve with treatment and proper rest. And when I say rest, I mean real rest, not the kind of rest that still involves caring for a newborn around the clock. She looked at Marco again. She needs support, Dr. Castillo said. Her voice was even, professional, not management, support. There's a difference, and I need the people around her to understand the difference. Marco nodded. He nodded like a man who was being told something he already knew and was only now understanding the full cost of having known it and not acted on it. He watched the footage 3 more times. He told me this later, not as confession, but as information. The specific, honest accounting of a person trying to show you their interior. He watched it on the night after the hospital and twice the following week. He said each time he watched it, he saw something different. Not different events, but a different version of himself in the space beside the couch. The person who had been 10 feet from what the camera recorded and had called it drama. I don't know how to explain it, he said. We were sitting on the floor. We had both been sitting on the floor a lot lately, in the way you gravitate toward a place where something real happened. Sophia asleep between us. I believed my version. I was so sure. I know, I said. That doesn't make it okay. I know that too. He was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you record yourself? To show me? If you'd shown me, Marco. I looked at him. I shouldn't have had to. He pressed his lips together. No, he said. You shouldn't have. We sat in the quiet. I've been reading, he said, I found some things. About postpartum complications. About spinal injuries from labor. About how often women aren't believed when they report pain. What did you find? That it happens all the time. He said it with the specific flatness of someone encountering a statistic they cannot make comfortable. That it's common. That women are systematically underestimated when they report physical pain. That the people around them call it drama. He looked at Sophia. I didn't know I was doing that, he said. I thought I was being rational. I thought you were. I know what you thought, I said. He looked at me. I'm not forgiving it yet, I said. I want to be clear about that. I love you, and I'm not done being angry about it yet. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. But I also know you're not a bad person, I said. You're a person who has a blind spot, and the blind spot hurt me, and we need to figure out what to do about that. He looked at his hands. I made an appointment, he said, for myself, with a therapist, next Thursday. I looked at him. I've been thinking about why I didn't believe you, he said, about what that is, where it comes from. I want to understand it before Sophia grows up watching me do it. I sat with that. Sophia made a small sound in her sleep, the particular almost sigh of a baby whose dreams, if they have them, seem to resolve towards something calm. Okay, I said. 8 weeks later, Dr. Castillo discharged me from the acute phase of rehabilitation with a home exercise program and a follow-up in 3 months. The nerve compression had responded well to treatment. The numbness in my feet was gone. The back pain was present but manageable. Managed properly with physical therapy and rest and the particular structural changes that happen when people around you finally understand that rest means rest. Dr. Ang's office called for my 6-week postpartum follow-up, which I attended alone. She reviewed my MRI results and my rehabilitation progress and asked how I was doing in the specific way of a doctor asking about more than the clinical picture. I told her about the camera. She was quiet for a moment. He saw the footage, she said. Yes, and he's in therapy, I said. We're in couples therapy. It's a process. She nodded. And you? She said. Are you in therapy? I started last week. I paused. My mother's been here. She's been helping with Sophia. Good. She folded her hands. I want to say something to you, and I want to say it clearly. She looked at me directly. What you experienced, the dismissal, the pattern of not being believed, that is not a small thing. It has a name in clinical literature. It has documented effects. What you carried for those 14 days, and what you had apparently been carrying longer than that in subtler ways, that's real, and it deserves attention, the same way the herniation deserved attention. I looked at her. Don't let the camera be the only thing that gets treated, she said. I drove home. Marco was in the kitchen. Sophia was in the bouncer on the counter, her current favorite position, watching him make dinner with the wide-eyed gravity of a baby cataloging the world. He was talking to her, narrating what he was doing, the way you narrate to a baby who understands nothing and everything, the way you practice being someone's parent by showing them who you are. He looked up when I came in. How did it go? Good, I said. She said I'm recovering well. He nodded. Something moved through his face. Not relief, exactly. More like the acknowledgement of something he carries now. The awareness of what 14 days without a diagnosis could have cost. Your mom called, he said. She wants to know if we're coming for the holidays. What did you tell her? I said I'd ask you. He turned back to the stove, and that we'd let her know. I stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at my family. My daughter watching her father cook, my husband who had failed me in a specific way and was doing the work of understanding why, the kitchen I had gripped the counter of in the dark at 5:47 a.m., waiting for my legs to cooperate. Tell her yes, I said. I picked up Sophia. She grabbed my finger with both her hands and held on with the particular full-body commitment of a newborn who has found something and is not letting go. Hi, I said. She looked at me with her enormous, serious eyes. She had my mother's forehead and Marco's stubbornness and something behind both of those that was entirely her own. Some quality of attention, some way of being present that I couldn't name yet but recognized already as a thing she was going to grow into, a thing she was already practicing. I held her against my chest and stood straight, both legs holding. The camera watched us from the corner. I had forgotten it was there again. That was okay. It had already done what it needed to do.